Flight Live, our weekly episode for people who are afraid to fly, people who know somebody who's afraid to fly, and people who just like to talk about airplanes and stuff. So, and the stuff is what we talk about too much probably sometimes. But anyway, welcome to everybody, and we're glad to have you back with us. If you haven't been here before, the first thing we want to do is invite you to, well, first I should say, tonight, as always, we have our ACE First Officer and Vice President in charge of Technical Services, Dieter Stautinger, who comes to us from Toronto, up in Canada, and then we have my good friend and longtime flying buddy, Eric Larson, who's there with his what kind of hat you got on tonight? Is that our Fearless Flight hat?
Yeah, I'm in uniform.
Oh, cool,
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
All right.
And he's got his call sign up there too. I see Captain Chopped Liver.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so welcome. What we'd like to do is first show you we have a slide here about joining our specialized group for people who are afraid to fly called the Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather Facebook group, and it's free. We would love to have you join us if you haven't joined us, and it's a great place to connect and interface with other fearful flyers and fearless flyers, people who have been successful or are working through it in all various stages of being afraid to fly. And we jump on as well. We monitor it, and so come join, identify yourself, introduce yourself, and leave a comment, leave questions, and look for answers there. And it's a great resource. So please take advantage of that. We had several more people join this week. We're looking to break 700 here. Can't believe it seems like just yesterday we started it and we were down around 50. And here we are up over 600 now. So thanks again for your support. Tonight's show, we're going to talk about a couple of things here. I have a poll question. I was just curious. This is something that I do periodically. When people fly, years ago, it was mostly about having a technical trigger. That is something that bothered you and inspired you to think thoughts of crashing, dying, things like that. The other kinds of triggers are what we call emotional triggers. And those are the ones where, it's not so much you're worried about the airplane being airworthy. It's more about your own airworthiness and whether you'll be able to handle the emotions that come up with that. So if you would take a moment and just drop an answer in there on the Facebook page. When I think about flying, I think more about A, is something going wrong, crashing and dying, the technical part. B, how badly I feel, if I'll be able to handle my emotions. That's the emotional part. C, both, and D, neither one. Okay, and if it's neither one, put what it is that bothers you about flying. So anyway, so do that through the course of the show here, and we'll try to get some sense of results by the time we have a special guest tonight, Jeff Farr. Who he and I reconnected after more than 5 years of first meeting each other, and he's going to share his experiences with us. And then we have a couple things in the aviation news roundup that we think are relevant. So if I can, Jeff, if you want to just come on and join us now. He's been quieting himself in the green rooms, as it were, in his own green room. And if when he comes on here, we'll just take off and we'll get his take on what his fear of flying has been like. So, okay. Welcome, Jeff. Thanks for showing up here tonight. He was nice enough. Unsuspecting. I'll let you just start off, Jeff. If you want to introduce yourself, and a little bit about, when you first noticed your fear and where you live and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. I'm Jeff Fav. I'm a professor at a university or college, in Los Angeles, and I'm legendary for my fear of flying. Pretty much that was the first thing most people learned about me, because I was afraid to fly from the time I was a small child, and I did not fly for more than 35 years. So it was a pretty extreme fear, and and been flying now for the last 5 years. So a lot of it has to do with meeting you and getting your kit, and it's been super helpful. It's not. It still takes work, but I'm thrilled to say I'm part of the flying world.
Well, good. Congratulations. One, for having the courage to come forward at any point in your life to deal with it. And two, for being a male. We don't have as many men that show up as we do women. And, there's a little bit of research out there that I've read that says that men are wired a little bit differently. So we process stress a little bit differently. But I think as equal or greater than is a reason that men are a little bit less likely to come forward and look for help. So really, you deserve a pat on the back from yourself, if nothing else. And you mentioned, one of the things that I don't think I've ever asked anybody when I was listening to you, you mentioned all these years and how you were known for this. Certainly in your own mind, you probably thought your reputation preceded you and on that. But what was it like all those years? Does it cause you to avoid conversations with flying? What's it like to have that, always on board with you?
I was, because I was known as a person who would never fly.
Yeah.
It was one of those things people just couldn't believe right away. And then when they realized I wasn't kidding, people would be like, "Oh, I'm afraid to fly too." And I would think, "Oh, really? I hear that you fly. I don't fly." And so people laughed a lot because I've been on every Amtrak line in America. I have been through the train system extensively. So I wasn't ever afraid to talk about flying because I was just never going to do it. It didn't become a thing until about 6 years ago when I decided I was going to make a big change.
And so you said like 13 years old was when you became aware of that. Had you ever flown prior to that time at all?
Yeah, I hope. Can you see me? There we go. I know I'm having some internet issues, but yes, I flew a lot as a child, and every time we were going to fly, I would worry about it from the minute I found out about it until we flew, and then it was a terrible experience. And then when we got to wherever we were going, all I would think was, can we just live wherever it is we have now gone to? And then when I was 13, I told my parents there was no way they would ever get me on a plane again. And I said, I'm too big now. You can't make me do it.
Well, I didn't fly when I was that young. I'm older than you, and so wasn't as available then. But I can relate. Fireworks that just terrified me. And I could remember being 4, 5, 6 years old even. And when we would go to the fireworks, I would actually hide on the front floor of the car all the way back up underneath there, where underneath the instrument panel, where the glove compartment there. And so that's one of the things I could relate to, and it didn't matter. And they, there weren't as many of the really colorful fireworks in those days. I don't want to make this about me, but they had a lot of those ones that were just a big old boomer. And when I would work myself at least a little bit more comfortable, and one of those would go off and it would set me off again. So I can identify. Matter of fact, I just got goosebumps thinking about being under the instrument panel in that car there. So anyway, you I think you touched on how it affected your life, when you had to fly, when you finally identified that you weren't how terrified you were. Did your folks give you a kind of a reprieve then, and did you just not fly then, or what was your life like then?
That was it. It was tough because I said, listen, you go do whatever it is you're going to do. You can just leave me at home. And that's what happened. They went on some trips without me, and I just, I told myself it was okay, but at the same time, I knew I was missing out on things, and it was hard. But when you're young, you just forget it. But of course, it didn't get better over time. It got worse over time. That's the thing. Sure. When you don't face these things, it just gets worse over the years. Yeah. So I missed a lot, but they realized I was never going to do it. So
was there anybody when you were a teenager, was there anybody that you found that you could relate to or could relate to you that was also afraid to fly, or did it just become this private hell that you lived in, and it kind of secretive about it?
I didn't know a single person who didn't fly. I knew people who were nervous, but no one could understand why. And they would just say, "You got to get over it. You got to get past it." And I kept saying, I can't." So no, it was actually a pretty lonely experience because no one, um, I just didn't know a single other person. And so it was very weird. But that's why I think I became known as that guy. Like that was me. I was that guy.
Yeah.
So,
That
good
is,
thing I had to tell people. Like I had to tell my now wife, I had to tell her early on, like, hey, just so you know, I don't do this thing. So, you know,
that
I'd
is,
like to.
you're certainly not unique with the problem, but that's kind of a unique start out of childhood. When you say, Ron, that's
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of,
It's
do you
less
pin that to
less
any
common.
one thing?
Yeah.
Do you pin that to any one thing or not really? That made you decide that?
um, my mom told me that when I was very little, that I was on a private plane. That was a very rough flight. It was a plane very small where we sat sideways, instead of forward. She said that I was really freaked out. And she said that and I was 2 or 3. And she said from that point forward, it was never a good experience for me. I don't even remember it, but that's what she says it probably started.
Yeah, and that's traumatizing, and it comes at a time in your life when you're not even verbal. So which signify it's not even so much that you're not verbal and you can't express it, but you don't have the cognitive capacity to process it. So it's really no surprise that when she tells that part of the story there. The good news is you really don't, and you're living proof. You really don't have to know exactly what caused it. You can get over that, and not only that, but other types of trauma and post-traumatic stress there. If you would just briefly take us through, what did you do, in your life to try to deal with this, and both before and then after you and I met, and you can go into how you and I met as well.
Sure, of course. I never planned to deal with this in any way, but I had a child, and we would take her on the train, and it was a challenging experience. And I thought I've really got to work on this, and I did tons and tons of research, and I ended up with what is essentially what I would call a 3-step process. The first thing I did was I went to EMDR therapy, which is a therapy for people who suffer trauma. It's usually done with eye motion, but sometimes it's done with vibrations. And what they do is have you relive feelings of fear while this is going on, and you kind of desensitize yourself. It's a very unusual experience. However, it has proven to be really effective for people who have trauma. I can't recommend it enough. It's fantastic if you find someone who's trained in it. I did go to a doctor and I asked I don't do any drugs or I don't drink at all, but I asked for a prescription of Xanax and I got it so I could have like a 0.5 milligram of Xanax. But I felt like I still needed to talk to somebody. I did a lot of research and then I stumbled on to you, Captain Ron, because I found your website and I was turned on by the idea that I could actually talk to somebody. For some reason, that felt really comforting because I knew there were a couple of things that bothered me more than other things. And I thought, well, maybe it's real. Like maybe he'll actually answer the phone, like instead of it's some kind of answering machine or something. And then I read about this harmonizer that people were giving good reviews to. So I read all the material and then I got this harmonizer, and then I talked to you and I asked you some very specific questions. And I was, I'm happy to say to you, you were incredibly nice to me and very much giving of your time, and you didn't rush me at all. And you actually drew things up on a board so I could see, or a computer so I could see what was going on. And then about a month later, I actually did it. And I used all of my tools and used my harmonizer, which I cannot, pretty much don't want to fly without. And so that was the process. And I only fly 2 or 4 times a year. So every time I have to gear up again, but if I do my work and I use my harmonizer, it seems to work. I'm going to fly next month. I'm a little concerned because I'm going to have to wear a mask, and I have a face shield, and
Sure.
it's all new stuff, but I'm excited anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that anything that adds, that takes people out of their comfort zone, or out of a routine and stuff like that, which the coronavirus does, because you got to do some special things there, and adds stress to it, can disrupt that. But basically, it sounds like you're able to me, which is ideal, you're able to, you put together a process so that now it's not like every time you fly, you have to reinvent the wheel and start from scratch again. You have a routine that you rely on. Is that true, or?
Absolutely, it's true. I have a very specific routine. I have I kind of do some mindfulness work. The week before, I watch the video that you provide of like taking off, and that helps me. And then I just sit down and relax, and I get my good headphones. And I took your advice. I turn up my harmonizer full blast, and I usually play it 2 or 3 times, and it seems to put me in the right mindset. So where I am, by the time I've listened to it 2 or 3 times, we're kind of on the way. And so, I do it the same way every time, and it does seem to work. There's occasionally we'll have some turbulence, and I still get a little edgy, but I am, the fact that I'm up there and doing it, it's mind blowing. My friends still can't believe it. Like they just can't believe it.
So when you get to the airport, what do you're waiting in the boarding area. What do you do? What do you do for yourself right there? Do you notice the anxiety building then, or is it more when you get on the airplane?
That's a really good question. What I usually do is I usually get some tea and I try to relax. I just talk to my wife, and I try to just act like it's fairly calm. Walk the airport a couple of times. It still feels surreal to me because I don't fly a ton. So when we get on a plane, it's still that feeling like, oh, okay. But usually when I sit down, I'm able to kind of, when we're taking off, I feel like for me, it was the two things that always were for me were the first like 2 minutes and then severe turbulence. Those were like the two things. Once we started, I know a lot of people are afraid of landing. When I was a kid, I was just like, "Hey, we're landing." That's great.
It's over.
But there was something about speed that has always. I don't do like roller coasters or anything. Speed makes me very, very edgy. And so, if there's no turbulence now, I'm very much like I can listen to my harmonizer and I'm very okay. It's only when I can feel movement that I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel good in my body, But but mostly if I continue the same routine, it does seem to work pretty well.
Let me just pursue that just real briefly there. So what are the sights, sounds, and sensations that give you the sensation of speed on takeoff? And if I'm understanding you correctly, the faster you sense that you're going, the more the anxiety builds. Is that true? Or okay, all right. So yeah. when do you get it? When I push the power up and release the brakes, okay, is it immediately, oh my God, now we're going to get going fast? Or is it literally as you hear the wheels spinning faster, as you see some kind of feedback from the outside that you're going faster? Which is it, or is it a combination of those?
It's a kind of a combination, I mean, better than anybody. When you're taxiing, my body's like, is this the time? Is this the time? Because like I can't see. Even though I sit by the window, I'm always like,
sure.
You guys it feels to me like you guys take 50 turns before we take.
And sometimes we do. Yeah, sometimes we do. Yeah.
So I'm like, is this the one? Is this the one? Is this the one? And then, yes. And then there's a definite elevation in me as there's an elevation in the plane. And I'm waiting for that moment when I don't feel the thing. But again, when I listen to this thing, it helps. It kind of keeps me just equal enough. And I'm like, right, okay, let's just get to that point. And incredibly now, barring heavy turbulence, now I'm very much like, okay, I still have this thing where I have to look out the window. I don't know why, but it makes me a connection to the ground. I don't even know if that makes any sense,
Yeah,
but
Eric,
it
I'm going to
helps.
say one thing, and I'm going to ask you for input here. But one of the things that I don't know, do you have any recollection of when you look out the window? Do you tend to look any place in particular, like close to the airplane, or do you look off in the distance? Can you recall, where your eyes are actually physically placed when you do that?
When when I look out the window, I look at the ground.
Okay, that's
I
the
am
reason I was
really,
hoping you'd say that is the one thing about that. If you ever open the car door at even 30 miles an hour and looked at the ground at the street going below you, it's disorienting because we don't consider most of the time, like even walking like this, I have full peripheral vision and I have a full field of vision. So when I'm walking, I'm not looking straight down below me. In fact, I take care of my 94-year-old mom. And one of the things that I was concerned about was when she would start stumbling and stuff. And when I did some research, they said that old people start to fall and stumble because as they get older, they become more fearful of falling, and it causes them to move their field of view or their focus closer to their feet, which if you imagine just next, when we get done with this tonight, just get up out of your chair and try walking around at a regular speed, looking down 3 feet in front of you. And you'll find that it's disorienting. So what I wanted to say was, I recommend to people, if you do sit by the window, because a lot of people do like to look out, try not to focus on, anywhere from the wingtip in. Try to look off onto the horizon because it will diminish somewhat your sensation of movement. Because if you're looking literally, I'm thinking if you're looking behind the wing where, you see the wing coming out and you're kind of, it's like opening the door in a way and you're looking right down there. It can be very disorienting there. And Eric, did you have something to say? I know you popped on there.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, normally we only turn 40 times, but if we get lost while we're taxiing, then that's the
Yeah.
back where it was supposed to be to start with.
We can always count on Eric for some reassuring remark here. So yeah, anyway, but yeah, we do turn a lot, and the airplane, I tell this for many reasons, but airplanes are designed to be in the air, So when we're in the air, that's why we have a taxi weight and a limiting weight when we're moving around and we're not in the air, because we only have typically 3 places where the entire weight of the airplane is supported. And similarly, when we turn on the ground, it's not designed. We don't turn like that in flight. It's very fluid, even though if you get in turbulence, it doesn't seem quite so fluid, but so turning can be disrupting. And it's no surprise that those are sensations. And if you have the wherewithal and the need to fly, every month or twice a month, or for your living, like I did and like Eric did, it becomes so much more normalized than what it does when you only fly 3 or 4 times a year. So, and I don't know really of a way to get over that, of the turning and all that, other than it's just necessarily. But the other part that I caught was when it does bring up the anticipatory anxiety, because you don't know when the last turn is before he's going to pour the coal to it, and the brain doesn't like uncertainty. Yeah. Okay. But the one way you can anticipate that is we will say we're next in line for takeoff, and we've asked the flight attendants to please be seated. So now that doesn't always happen with 10 seconds prior to taking the runway. Sometimes they'll do it and then they have to wait for a landing airplane or something like that. But when the pilots say that, that within the next minute to 2 minutes, typically, you are going to take the runway, if that helps you in the future. So anyway,
no,
okay. So talk about the flight kit. What is it? And if you could, give a brief description of that, and how did again, a little more detail about how you used it.
Of course, yeah. Well, you've upgraded since I first got it, and now you have this whole community, which I think is fantastic. You provide videos and audios and testimonials and different stories. And all of them, I think, are a good way to just normalize the idea of flying, and that other people are experiencing similar fears, which I think is super helpful. And then you have this very special recording that you created, and it was clear, I could tell right away you'd spent a lot of time on it, this harmonizer, and the way it kind of goes in different ears, and the voice that's used is very calming, and the loud sounds, and there's something about it that puts you in this kind of calming mindset. And I always know when I'm getting to the end, and I just go right back to the beginning. But it does something, and then it's just part about looking through the aircraft. I always do that. It's like, now look about the aircraft, and I do that every single time. But those things, as useful as they are, the main reason that caught me was getting a phone call with you, because again, one of the things you said that I never forgot was the thing you just said a minute ago about planes being designed to be in the air, because it was this whole idea of, because for anybody who's afraid, it feels like the plane's just going to fall, like the plane's always just going to fall. And you had this whole idea, you explained very clearly, like, not only does it not fall, like, we have to make it go down. We have to make it go down. It's meant to be doing the thing it's doing. And all those things were incredibly helpful. And I think I saw you say this somewhere else, but or maybe I read you said this, but I don't do it every time, although I wish I would. But anybody who hasn't flown, who's going to fly, should say hello to the captain.
Absolutely.
It is such a big deal. Like, I don't know how often you still talk to pilots and stuff, but they should always leave that freaking door open. There's something about being able to see a captain and be like, she looks like a normal person. She looks like she's taking it seriously. She looks like, or he's serious. He's got it going on. You see one or two capable people out there. It makes a difference, man. So please tell people to keep doing that, because it's a big deal. And when I went on my first flight.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, when I went on my first flight, after all that time, I went in, they let me all the way in, and I talked to them, and I knew they were busy, and I was very emotional, and I was crying a little bit, and I was the first person on the plane, and but they took like 30 whole seconds to talk to me, and they're like, we're going to get there good, it's all going to be good, and it made a big difference. So everyone should do that.
Absolutely. Connecting with the crew is probably the most important thing that you could do. And early boarding, we talk about that in past shows about identifying yourself as someone who has a condition. And I have some specific dialogues. Email us. We'll send you the dialogue that you can use and all that, and how to use it if it's pre-assigned seating, like on many of the major carriers, or unassigned seating like on Southwest. There's a little bit different nuance in the way you do that. But basically what I've heard you say is that, the phone call, the connection that you and I made, and everybody, I offer that to everybody. There's a free 15-minute phone call. And I'm sure Dieter will put the link in there in the notes. I can tell how people's minds are not on flying right now. It's on the coronavirus and all that, because that's dropped off. But even when I invite people to do that, it's amazing how many people do not take advantage of it. And I think they have attitudes similar to what you said. Like, I probably won't really get a real person. It's going to be some kind of generic canned information or something like that. And I want to reassure everybody that is not my modus operandi. I really enjoy talking with people. You are the people who taught me how to be effective and help people over this past 32 years. I have some formal training, both in psychology and in aviation, but believe me, the things that serve me the best are my own experiences with post-traumatic stress, and learning from you all what works and what doesn't work. And so I want to thank you. You did mention one thing about the EMDR. I think that's a valid tool for a lot of people. And we have integrated into the flight harmonizer. It has the EMDR techniques in it. It has bilateral stimulation and multi-evocation, where we use multiple voices talking. And it's designed basically to provide you with a distracting element, and it's also provided with a curiosity factor, where it goes back and forth, and you have to kind of pay attention to who's talking and all that. And that's what you need, because the people who are as bright as you are I can guarantee you, because if you make the cut as a fearful flyer, you are higher, smarter than the average trained bear. Typically, you just cannot shut down that analytical brain of yours, and so once it starts going, you need to have some kind of intervention. So anyway, last word. What would you say to somebody who's out there and they think, he's not as bad as I am, or all the things that you would get? What would you say to them? What would you say to them, Jeff?
First of all, that's not possible. I've never met anybody, so that's not a thing. You can do this, and there is and using the kit helps a ton, but don't be afraid to research and do all the things that you need to do, but you should tell people. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's okay to tell a flight attendant, like, I just want you to know I'm new at this, or I'm super nervous, because I don't know these people who meet terrible flight attendants, but I have yet to meet one. Everyone I've met has been so nice and so helpful. And every pilot I've met has been so nice. So I don't know how that's possible, but it really works out that way. And so and I'm someone who has to actually bend back a little bit in my seat. I'm tall, and I've turned around and said, "Listen, is it okay if I move it back?" I've never had somebody say no. People are very nice. I think we don't give people enough credit. If you just say, "I'm nervous," they want to help you, and it helps me a ton.
I totally agree. And people often ask me, are the flight crews trained to deal with fearful flyers? And I will say, by and large, no. But when you expose yourself, when you make yourself vulnerable, when you get on the airplane, you are training them. You are showing them that not everybody is as cool, calm, and collected, or at least on the outside, as they perceive all the time. Yeah, I used to tell my flight attendants in the briefing, I guarantee you today we will have at least 25% of the people on board have some kind of anxiety related to flying, and we'll have at least one person who's never flown before on this flight today. And those odds those numbers prevail, because that's just the way humanity is. We have new people coming in at the bottom and old people going out at the top. And we have a constant turnover with that. The last thing, you did mention that you have a flight coming up and you had some concerns with the COVID. Any specific things that you're worried about that we might just touch on that might help other people here about flying in this era?
Well, that's a really good question. The first thing we did was we broke up our flight. We didn't know if it'd be better or not, but we're going to fly from Burbank to Las Vegas, and then an hour later we'll fly to Indianapolis. This is where I fly every year, and then we're going to go back the same way. Okay. I think other than my normal nervousness with flying, is our biggest thing is the airport. To be honest with you, we're like that. We have shields and we have masks, but
sure,
where do we go, and can we even sip water on the plane? And I bought long straws, because normally I'm like this guy who eats chocolate the whole time. It's just and so it's all, it's going to add a layer of stuff. So I don't know if there's anything you want to say on that, but
yeah, I on two levels. One, I flew just about 2 weeks ago now with a couple of fearful flyers, and we went from Phoenix to Las Vegas and back. And then 10, 11, 12 days later, 2 days after the show last week, I came down with what I had said, if I was going to give myself COVID-19, this is what it would look like. I had the fever, I had the chills, I had incredibly flu-like symptoms, all that, and I panicked because I've got my 94-year-old mom living with me, and I'm really sensitive to that. And let me tell you, so I called up my primary care physician. I went in there and I was able to get tested the next day, and then they told me, you might not have the results because you live in Phoenix here, and there's an upsurge like in the Arizona area, and because they're so busy, you might not get it till next week. Well, I got it back yesterday, and it was negative. But here's what I went through in that time. It was hell, because I was doubting myself. I've been very conscientious because of my mom in putting a face mask on whenever I go out. But the one thing that I do, and this is the thing that I would, this is not a medical opinion. This is just Ron. Okay. what I notice is I do this a lot. I'm touching my face, and I've read where you can eat the COVID virus, right? It does not survive your GI tract, okay? But where it enters is either through your nose, in the droplets, or in your eyes. And the one thing that I said, if you get lucky, Ron, and that you do not have the COVID-19, this is what you're going to do. You're going to be much more mindful of washing your hands. And when you wash your hands, that is going to become a visual signal to you that you are not to touch your face after that point. Because that is what had I gotten it, and when you look at it, how do you get the cold or the flu? You get it from contact with people who have either surfaces or touching people who have the cold or flu viruses. So anyway, so that's the one thing.
I adapted that exact thing like a flow, like we do in the cockpit when I leave the house, that I can't touch my face till I get back. And in the rare times I'll sneak to the gym on like a Friday. One of my wife and I's favorite flight attendant buddies said, Irk. She called me Irk with no I. Irk. Only total losers and married people go to the gym on Fridays, which is actually held up really well. I can be in there with 2 people, but I'm in the gym going, don't touch your face. Don't touch your face. I mean, I do it the whole freaking time until I leave. Don't touch my face.
And I find for me, wearing a mask is the best reminder I have. So when the mask is on and I go up, I think, you got the mask on, don't touch your face. Yeah. So that's the thing I would say personally. And then as far as when you travel, the one from the flight, there will be limited service on Southwest. What they did was on the one leg, when they closed the door, or just before they closed the door, they actually delivered a can of water. I have my Southwest can of water right here that I brought back as a facsimile, and you'll have that. But I totally support you, Jeff. Take all the food that you can imagine that you might want to eat, so that you're self-contained with that. And drinking straws and however to facilitate for you and your wife and your little girl. And then other things related to that are just had a mind burp here. But food, mainly just the food and what you want to drink on the flight for that. And I think it'll be fine. And then wearing the mask, that's the main thing you can do. And you can check on the airline beforehand. Some airlines are selling as many seats as they have on there for the most part, except I think they're basically preserving the seats across from flight attendants to keep those open and protect the crews a little bit. Southwest does, in fact, not sell the middle seats, but you still, like you have a family of 3, you can still sit in the same row if you know each other. So anyway, so that's the most that I can offer, and along with Eric's experience there with the not touching the face.
I was just going to say about the only reason I can ever imagine on a pre-flight that you would find the cockpit door closed is somebody came out of either the first class or the forward lab, or they have it set up and the doors are hinged back to back, and they came in out of the lab and went wham, and when they opened the lab door, it slammed the cockpit door. And I can remember a zillion times turning around going, why is it so quiet? There's a riot back here. And you go, and right about the time the flight will call, what are you guys doing? You can open that up or what? And because somebody came out of the lab and slammed it shut, and you're going, we should have a biker rally going back here, and all of a sudden it sounds like a library. That's about the only reason I can imagine it will be shut.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, if you have any final words or anything like that, I'd like to again thank you so much for being vulnerable, sharing this with the rest of our listeners, and come back anytime.
No, it's my pleasure. I came because you helped me, and I'm more than happy to tell people how you did help me. And this will be an unusual experience for my family, but it's important. We see my in-laws; they're kind of alone, and so that's why we're going. And I will definitely email you when I get back and tell you.
Can't wait.
I'll send you a picture of me with my face shield.
Yeah. And if possible, maybe we'll have you back on just to talk about what your expectations, whether they were met or not, and overall what was experienced. So thanks again, Jeff. You
Anytime.
Can continue and stay with us if you want. We got just a couple more things I want to highlight here, and then we're going to shut it down for the week there. The thing I wanted to move on to right now is talking about what we'll call it Aviation News Roundup, but there's 2 kind of themes to that. One is I want you to look at, I've got 2 or 3 articles that I want to highlight here. And I want you to notice the headlines, because flying is all about triggers. All right. And what are triggers? Triggers are the stories that we tell ourselves. And that is what, and people say, what should I do? How should I get over this? What can I do to get over this? I don't care what you do, techniques, tools, strategies, whatever you use, it's all going to involve paying attention to the story that you tell yourself about something that happens related to flying or not. And whether it's reading a newspaper account, whether it's hearing about an accident, whether it's about walking through the terminal and telling yourself there's too many people here, this is dangerous. No matter what you do, the solution ultimately is going to be changing the story that you tell yourself. So the one slide I have here is the one before this. Actually, I had on there. Pay attention to where your attention is. Don't get, in this case, don't get sucked in by catchy headlines here. Okay. And the first one here that Dieter's got up there, the FAA warns that near empty jets pose a danger. What in the hell could this possibly relate to, Eric? What are they doing? Should I be worried about that?
Let me think. No, but okay. It's a catchy headline.
It is.
And what the real meaning of that is that during this virus and with the light loads, there are some different considerations for the flight crews, and one of them that they address in there is airplane handling can be a little different. And the performance, as we always talk about, in case of injured player and other things, is we always have plenty, is excessive. And now the airplane is very, very light. The handling qualities, some of the handling qualities can be extreme. And so the pilots need to be aware of that.
What do you mean by handling quality, Eric? What do you mean?
What we call the weight and balance, the feel of the airplane with full of passengers as opposed to empty, can be very different. The reaction to the flight control inputs can be very rapid and sensitive. And we're operating the airplane at much lower speeds than we usually do for takeoff and landing because we're light. So there's control, what we call control feel aspects of flying the airplane at very light weights that we've done, but we're not used to doing on a regular basis. And so there's some caution there. The other things they were talking about, I saw some interesting stuff from the company of the pilots to beware of, since they have so many airplanes that have been idled for so long, rotating through. There have been an instance, which is not serious for the passengers, but it is for the pilots, to make sure the maintenance logbook in the airplane is in the right airplane and that the flight plan matches the airplane you intend to take. So it has the right equipment indexes on it, the right weight and balance information, that kind of thing. Because there's so many idle planes, sometimes the flight plans and the logbooks are getting messed up, and you need all 3 of them to match before you go. So these aren't considerations. And when they're coming out of storage, I talked in a blog about medium and long-term storage, and if they've just been returned from storage, it takes some excessively careful pre-flight to make sure it's fueled correctly and all the protective stuff over external ports has been removed and that sort of thing, so that it is in fact ready to go. So there's extra considerations. I think it's over dramatization to say they pose a danger.
Yeah.
I think there's more drama.
When you say that, the one thing that two things that people might notice more than anything is, one, when we rotate and get airborne, we're gonna come off like a scalded rabbit if we're light. Okay. And you could always do that. I mean, we had flights that we brought through Las Vegas at 2:00 in the morning, coming back to Phoenix, repositioning the airplane basically. And those were always light. So it's always been a factor. It's just that now you may have more flights that tend to be lighter. And so takeoff performance is going to be more noticeable. And the other thing is, when we level off, you know, the pilots, they may be a little bit slow on the level off sometimes. And so you may feel your tummy come up into your throat a little bit more, which is an uncomfortable feeling for people. But I would say that's the main things that you probably notice sensationally in the back there. So, okay. enough for that. And again, so we dealt with that headline. The next slide there we got is I'm sorry, it's there. This one is one of my favorites. As with, they're talking about the COVID-19 virus, right? Or the pandemic. As with air travel, takeoff and landing are the most dangerous parts of a pandemic. Okay, great. Kudos to the author for using that catchy title or headline to get your attention. But what that person doesn't realize probably is that he's going to lose the fluidity. He's going to lose the meaning in the article, which is basically when you're learning more about something like the pandemic, we make more mistakes. Okay. And as things change, when we tend to, when we're trying to get the procedure down like that. So he's saying the beginning and the end of the pandemics are the most fluid and all that, just like takeoff and landing. All Eric and I want to impart to you right here is get the whole notion about takeoff and landing being dangerous. Okay. We manage the risk for the entire flight. You will never be able to get on an airplane and skip the takeoff or the landing. Okay. So we do them all. We don't count on one or the other not being there. So don't get trapped by that headline there. And notice, I mean, they use old Boris Johnson there. I mean, they've got all of it going for you. Right?
I'm glad I read the slide because I whipped through it and I go, what is Boris Johnson doing talking about this stuff?
Right. Just his haircut, I think, and his expression there. All right, and then the last thing again is there's another article I pulled that says, what can 9/11 teach us about aviation's post-coronavirus future? Okay, and again, the fact that they use 9/11 in there, who out there doesn't remember 9/11? So again, that can trigger that part of you that has nothing to do with the risk of flying airplanes. This is basically, again, they're using something catchy from the history of aviation here in the world, and they're saying that what it can teach us about is things are going to change after the coronavirus. You're already aware of that. You're already aware of the social distancing, and sooner or later we're going to come out with we're going to find a vaccine. We're going to find alternative ways to deal with this and put it back where it belongs as not a threat to human beings. But what they go on to talk about in this article are, we're already seeing that businesses, boards, for example, they might meet 4 or 5, 6 times a year. They may meet 1, 2, or 3 times in person, face to face, like they have traditionally, but the rest of them will be done over Zoom or video conferencing. You all know, just from what we're doing right now, video conferencing is here to stay, and it's going to be a dominant force in the business community. The airlines are dealing with that. They have people that they're paying good money to figure out how are we going to get people back into the air, because leisure, obviously you're not going to have a Hawaiian vacation via Zoom, so that's probably going to stay there, but business travel is definitely going to change. And any thoughts about that yourself, Eric, about the changes that you've seen?
I would agree with all that. And I was cautiously optimistic, just watching some of the company's stock prices were popping a little bit. And my company announced on our company pages that they had just pulled 143 narrow body airplanes out of the desert, 737s and Airbuses. I never knew if you should say Airbuses or Airbuy, but nevertheless, they were 320s. Yeah. And so they pulled. And
that was up until just recently not anticipated, right? They were.
This is the last week. They're reversing the storage process, pulling these things out, doing everything they have to reverse them to get them back in a normal operation, anticipating bookings, which, given the fact that we're midway through summer, coming into the fall, which would normally be the slow time, I think is a really good sign.
Yeah. So anyway, so again, what was the consensus? One, the looking at the headline, don't get sucked in to the headline and let it titillate you the way it's designed to do that. Okay. And if it does, pay attention to where your attention is, which is the essence of mindfulness. Pay attention to what's going through your mind. You wouldn't put certain foods in your mouth, because if you are what you eat, that's one reason we pay attention to that. But if you think about it, you are what you think more than your behavior is based on what you think. So be much more mindful when you're doing things like reading headlines and reading articles out there. So if Dieter can come on, if we got any questions that warrant some answers here, or if you got any input or feedback on people, basically, are they what chicken or fowl, chicken or fish?
Yeah. So while you guys were on the camera, we had a very good side chat going here in the Facebook chat, and there are certain things that are going to be more challenging for people that already have a fear of flying, and masks and the breathing, especially if claustrophobia is part of it. So we had a couple of comments about that, and
hey, I got a good technique. Yeah. That's the thing that bothers me. I don't like things over my nose. And so I noticed, and I saw this somewhere in a little tip there. So if you use this, the first thing that happens if I got my glasses on, even in 100-degree heat, it causes my glasses to fog over. Okay. So what they said is if you roll a piece of tissue paper, about that wide or so, and put it right along the bridge, the bridge part of your mask, even the most basic mask I got, it helps. And it does. It actually helps keeping the air from going up there. It's kind of like a seal more than anything. Not not that kind of seal, a seal where you can get a good tight seal on your face. But anyways, it does. It really seems to help. Now I got to do a little manipulation. I might modify and put some Scotch tape around it to keep it in place, but it did help to prevent that.
Cool. Susan Miglasio is pointing out that the flights are very cheap right now, so you should come to Boston and do a class up there. So right. I will say, Susan, the goal that as we're all adjust for a very different return to air travel, a different relationship to learning and stuff. Our goal is to get this online course done, and so then therefore that will be a prerequisite to the 301, the flying classes.
Yeah.
And then we can do them in different places
Locales
around the country.
Yeah.
And so
so we hear you, and that is one of the changes that is in the air, that we will definitely be operating differently in the future. So
okay, but that was about it. And then I kind of started a bit of a side poll of do you like looking out the window or not? And so we got a lot of good answers in there, a lot of good comments. So very, very cool. Yeah, altogether, that was a great show. Thanks, Jeff, again for coming on. And
totally. And thanks to you, Dieter, again. What people don't see is all the work that you do behind the scenes to get it so that I can focus and do the part that my part in it is. So the big things that you are going to be seeing come out, the online class or online course in particular, is largely from the groundwork that Dieter has done and is doing right now, helping me. And Eric has got a new blog post in the mill, so look forward to that, hopefully this week. And I'm doing what I do, whatever that is. So anyway, so thanks to both.
Module 1 of our course.
Module 1, yeah. So thanks again to both of you, Eric. Thanks, Dieter, and thanks to Jeff again for showing up. And thanks to all of you. We really appreciate you showing up. And it's a lot more fun thinking that we're talking to real people out there than it is talking to ourselves, although we enjoy that as well. So I hope you have a great week, and stay safe, and come back next week for Fearless Flight Live. We'll see you then.